friends, this is the last part of GS1 2014. This is the fourth part. In the previous three parts, we have discussed modern India, art and culture, world history, Indian society, and three questions of geography as well. In this part, we will be discussing the remaining 77 questions of geography. The previous three questions of geography which we have discussed that belong to geomorphology and climatology. Okay, the remaining questions we will discuss in this video. So without much ado, we'll move on to the first question now. Again, this is a question on climatology. Tropical cyclones are largely confined to South China Sea, Bay of Bengal, and Gulf of Mexico. Why? This is a very straightforward question. You didn't have to do much. In comparison to 2013 question, where very technical question was asked as to the naming of tropical cyclones, this question is relatively straightforward, asking only about the territorial extent of tropical cyclones. So, as we generally follow the approach, you will just define tropical cyclones in the beginning because this is the topic of the question. Then we will be giving the causes of tropical cyclones. Then we will be relating those causes to given areas. Then we will be giving the world map. Now these four things are very important. This is a table where you can show names of cyclones in those areas. Now, this is something which is extra, and this can give you some extra marks. Okay, now why I want you to make a table in this case is because, again, so that it will become more presentable, it will be easy for the examiner to identify that yeah, you have mentioned those names as well. Before I show you the answer structure, I want you to see the world map. Again, I am showing you too many world maps because I want you guys to practice drawing world maps, okay, so that you can easily draw them in your examination hall. Now, the tropical cyclones in the world, as you can see, the typhoons are over here. This is showing the direction also. Cyclones are over here, okay, and over here. Then you have hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. This is the Bay of Bengal. This is the South China Sea, okay, and this is the Gulf of Mexico. All right. Now, coming to the answer structure. In the beginning, we'll define tropical cyclones. These are low pressure atmospheric systems of low latitudes. Origin is limited to 5 degree to 30 degree. The causes, very simple. You can pick up the causes from any book, any standard geography book or NCERT also. Presence of warm oceanic surface, presence of ITCZ, Coriolis force, high moisture, minimum vertical wind shear. What I mean by this is that the air should be allowed to go up, okay, and it should not be obstructed. And then over the troposphere, divergence of air is also important for the cyclone to form. Divergence of air in the upper troposphere. All right. Now all these causes which are given are fulfilled in the given areas. The given areas means South China Sea, Bay of Bengal, and Gulf of Mexico. Now this is the table I was talking about. The table in Southeast Asia or South China Sea, they are called as typhoons. In Caribbean Sea, they are called as hurricanes. In Indian Ocean, they are called as tropical cyclones. So this question was very simple. Nothing much had to be done. The important part of this question was the world map. This had to be drawn, and such a question can be repeated again. Okay, so please learn this world map so that you can reproduce this again whenever it is asked. We'll move to the next question. This is a very good question, and such questions have now been trending in UPSC because the topic of climate change has been asked in some way or the other, either in GS 1, 2, 3, 4, or in essay as well. There has been an essay asked as well on climate change. Okay, so climate change is an issue which has gained much more consciousness, especially since 2014. So you can't ignore this. And whenever you are facing a question on climate change, always remember you have to quote IPCC reports. I am sure you know what is IPCC. It is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay, and it comes out with regular reports. It comes out with assessment reports. It had come out with assessment report number 5 in 2015. Apart from that, it has also come out with a special report in 2018. All right, so which you can again quote in any climate change answer. All right, now coming to the question. So these are some points which you need to always keep in mind. Like I told you about El Nino, you can always quote the economic survey. About feminization of agriculture, you can quote economic survey. Similarly, when we will be facing questions of oceanography or oceanic deposits or ocean navigation, then we will always be quoting the International Seabed Authority and the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. So these are some tips which you need to keep in mind. These are some key tricks which can help you get more marks. Bring out the relationship between shrinking Himalayan glaciers and the symptoms of climate change in the Indian subcontinent. Now, the keywords in this question, first of all, the topic of the question is climate change. The keywords in the question are symptoms of climate change and shrinking Himalayan glaciers. All right. Then the question is restricted to the Indian subcontinent. The introduction is simple: define climate change. The background is what are the symptoms of climate change which can be seen in the Indian subcontinent and how those symptoms are impacting the glaciers. Okay. The impact on glaciers has certain other consequences as well. This is optional to write, not very important. You can or you may not. Okay. So now the answer structure. Uh, in this over here you'll write because of global warming we are facing climate change, which is why we are facing unusual weather changes across the world as well as in India. The various symptoms of climate change in India are: it has affected monsoon and the rainfall patterns. How it has affected monsoon? The breaks have increased, onset of monsoon has delayed, okay, pattern has become unpredictable. We have rainfall in seasons when we did not have rainfall earlier. Okay, then the instances of droughts and floods have also become more frequent and unpredictable. All right, now how has this impacted the glaciers? This is where you will face slight difficulty in forming 5 to 6 points. Okay, now here you have to think about not only Himalayan glaciers, you have to think about glaciers as a physiography. What are the components of glaciers? Now glaciers not only consist of ice, they also consist of certain biodiversity, they also consist of snowfall, then there is vegetation as well, then there are glacier lakes as well. This is the information I have. This is the point which students generally miss. Now this is what you can learn from your study of GC Leong, where you learn about glacial landforms. So similarly, I've found 6 points over here that the melt of ice has increased, which is why the ice caps have reduced. The biodiversity has impacted, particularly vulnerable species such as polar bears, snow leopards. Okay, or also you can mention there are certain species of deers which have been impacted. The snowfall has reduced, which is why the rainfall patterns have also been affected. The snow line has receded. Vegetation of higher altitude has also been impacted, which has led to deforestation in the higher altitudes. Glacial lakes or moraines have also gone dry. Okay, now these are certain points. Now, as I told you earlier, that you can also quote the IPCC fifth assessment report. I agree it is very difficult to memorize so many numbers in this case, but I've just given you an idea for the particular answer, that because this is a data which you can be using generally in essay questions or in any question in GS2 or GS3. Whenever a question on climate change is asked, that is how it is affecting the Indian subcontinent. So this is the data which you can use. And the data is very simple, that the glaciers are shrinking at an alarming rate of 0.5% annually and are expected to shrink by 45% by 2100 according to the IPCC's fifth assessment report. All right. So, and this is the special report I was talking about. I hope the answer is pretty clear. The exercise which you need to do in this answer is to make points when there are lesser points. How do you do that? You, in this case, what I've done is I've thought about glaciers and not just Himalayan glaciers. I've thought about glaciers in general and then generated certain points. This is a data difficult to memorize, I agree, and difficult to collect also, but if I'm mentioning here, you can definitely use it somewhere else. The IPCC special report of 2018, it has given a clear warning. The impacts at 2 degrees Celsius are catastrophic. 2 degrees Celsius, I am sure you are aware about this 2 degrees Celsius increase. It has been in news almost for every UNFCCC summit. it is very difficult but to remain within 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. US is the biggest obstacle because it has also left the climate talks. Paris Agreement, it has left the Paris Agreement. Then this is a statement which you can use again and again. The world needs a plan B to address climate change because there is no planet B right now. India must take the lead in forming a global coalition. So this is the report which you can quote time and again in your answers of climate change. Okay, this should come in handy. Now, I hope this gives you an idea as to how to approach questions on climate change. We will be dealing with a lot of questions on climate change in 15, 16. 16 primarily a number of questions were asked, and 15 also a couple of questions were asked. Okay. If you have any query, do mention in the comment section, or if you have any suggestion as well, mention that also in the comment section so that we can incorporate in the coming video. Coming to the next question. Whereas the British planters had developed tea gardens all along the Shivaliks and Lesser Himalayas from Assam to Himachal Pradesh, in effect, they did not succeed beyond the Darjeeling area. Explain. Again, a very simple question. In such a question, drawing of map is not very necessary because the question essentially asks you about reasons. So this should form the main body of your answer. And also, before I begin, I want to tell you something. Whenever you are facing a question or addressing a question on crops, be it any crop, be it cash crops, be it plantation crops, okay, be it normal crops, which any other crop, always think on the lines of three parameters: temperature, rainfall, soil. These three parameters should directly give you 3 points. After that, if you know any point, that will be an extra point. Labor is a point which you can always think about. Okay, then there's the point of geology or physiography. By physiography, I mean relief, structure of the area. So this can give you additional points. So 1 point is temperature, second is rainfall, third is soil, fourth is labor, fifth is physiography, sixth is geology. But these 3 points you should always think about whenever you're addressing a question on crops. Without fail, just think about these points. Rest all the points are generally extra. Okay. Now in this question, just to give you a clear idea what the examiner is trying to ask over here, because the question is slightly tricky, although the answer is very simple. The question is slightly tricky. The examiner basically asks you that yeah, the Britishers had planned to for plantation crops all along the Shivaliks, okay, but they only were able to do it over here. Why it did not succeed in doing so over here in this area? Now, because the topic is on plantation crops, you can introduce your answer by writing what plantation crops, what are those crops, what are the examples of plantation crops. Then you can start about examples. Why not entire Shivalik? Why only till Darjeeling? Now, plantation crops are those crops which are grown on plantations covering large estates. Tea is an example of plantation crop, and its cultivation was started by the Britishers in order to compete with Chinese tea at that time. Other examples of plantation crops are coffee, okay, which is very common in southern India. Now, the second part which I will talk about the conditions of growth. That is, why not entire Shivalik, why till Darjeeling? I've not wrote the entire answer. I just given you key points: the geology, rainfall, temperature, soil, and labor. You just have to write that these conditions are required for tea crops, which are available in Shivaliks of Assam till Darjeeling, and these are conditions which are not available from Assam to Himachal Pradesh. So that will be the answer. It's a very simple question. Just to give you an idea of what are the conditions required for tea crops, it requires laterite soil which is well drained with water permeability. Temperature should be 20 to 30 degrees. Rainfall should be 150 to 200 centimeter rainfall. Labor intensive crop, and for the labor it used to come from Bihar and Bengal for the same. All right, and geology also of the uh, two parts was different, which it was more suitable in the Assam lower Himalayas. All right, I hope it is clear. Always remember what I mentioned here, the six parameters. The three parameters are very important. The next three parameters, if you can think about them, that also will add to your answer whenever you're writing about any crop. All right, now coming to the next question. Again, a very simple question. Why did the Green Revolution in India virtually bypass the eastern region despite fertile soil and good availability of water? So the topic of the question is Green Revolution. You can simply start by introducing what was the Green Revolution, when did it occur in India, who was the who was the main person behind Green Revolution. Then, why did it bypass the eastern region despite having good soil and fertility? So over here, again, a very simple approach has to be followed. Green Revolution was successful in certain areas because of certain features. The features of Green Revolution, you just have to mention those features, mention those characteristics of Green Revolution, and then you have to write that these characteristics were available in areas like Punjab, Haryana, and coastal areas of India, and they were not available in the areas of eastern region. That is why it was not successful over here. Here I have mentioned something way forward. Generally, it is not a standard approach of writing way forward in such questions, but why I have mentioned in this question, because the government has taken a particular step in this regard. That is why that is necessary to be incorporated in this question, and that step is second generation green revolution. Okay, so you have to mention about that, which particularly focuses on success of green revolution in the eastern region of India. Okay, just to give you better answer, better idea, and this is the answer structure. It is a brainchild of MS Swaminathan. The Green Revolution began post consecutive droughts of 1963, 64, and 64, 65. It was introduced to India by Dr. Borlaug. Okay, the success of Green Revolution was so high that today India is the second largest producer of wheat and rice. It was not successful in Eastern India because, again, the features of Green Revolution: agri inputs, irrigation, electrification, mechanization, credit awareness of farmers. Inputs included high yielding variety seeds, insecticides, pesticides, and fertilizers. These were all the characteristics of Green Revolution. All these were not available in Eastern India. However, they were available in Northwestern India and in coastal regions. That is why it was not successful in Eastern India. You have not done anything new. You just have to focus on what were the features of green revolution. You have to write your answer using the same information which you have learned. All right, and the way ahead in this regard, the government has taken up the step of second generation green revolution so that it is successful in Eastern India as well. This is the conclusion. This is something which I think should be incorporated in this answer. If you do not, if you have less time or something, then you can ignore this part, but it can be accommodated over here. All right, simple question, so nothing much to worry about. We'll move to the next question now. This is a tricky question. Account for the, although the answer is again simple, the trickiness in the question is how do you understand the question? Account for the change in the spatial pattern of iron and steel industry in the world. So over here, this question can be understood in two ways. The question, first of all, the topic of the question is iron and steel industry. So you can simply start, the introduction should be what is the importance of iron and steel industry, how it was the harbinger of industrial revolution in the world, how it has been the foundational industry of the world, how it is a key industry in the current times as well. However, the main body of the question is where the confusion comes in. Now, some people understood this as, because, for example, in the case of India, what has happened was conventionally the industry was located in these areas because these were rich in the raw materials. Over time, the industry shifted to southern India over here, even though this region was not rich in the raw materials, and it even decentralized to Vishakhapatnam. Okay. Now, why did this happen? Now, this is one way of understanding the question. However, the question does not ask you that. Okay. The question is asking you across the world. How has the iron and steel industry changed its position across the world? Spatial pattern, by spatial pattern, I mean the position of coal and steel industry, coal and iron and steel industry. Before I begin, I want to show you the world map, and I want to also show you how that should be incorporated in your answer. Traditionally, the iron and steel industry was located in the areas which were affected by industrial revolution, and that was USA, in eastern USA, Europe part, then Japan. Okay, so these were the areas where industrial revolution was successful in the beginning, but contemporarily these industries are now moving to India and China. Okay, in fact, now China is the largest producer of steel in the world, followed by India, followed by Japan. Okay, so these industries have moved. All right, you have to make the world map and you have to show this transition by showing these arrows, how the industry has moved over the years. All right, this is the exercise that you have to do in this question. Those people who have understood it in this manner, it is not correct. All right, now coming to the approach. In the introduction, you can simply write about the iron and steel industry and the locational factors of the industry in very brief, because this is not the main part of your answer. Then conventionally, why it was in developed countries, and contemporarily why it has shifted to developing countries. This should be the answer structure of your answer. Introduction. I told you earlier, iron and steel industry is considered as the harbinger of industrial revolution. Today, it is the key industry of the global economy. Locational factors is a secondary thing, not important to write, only if you have time and space. Conventionally, centers, it was established where IR was successful, industrial revolution was successful, like USA, Western Europe, and Japan. Ready market was available. Ports were also available for exporting the uh, product, and raw material was coming from colonies. Contemporarily, however, the industry has shifted to China, South America, and India. Why so? Because the internal demand is growing, patterns of consumption are changing, production and exchange patterns are also changing, population is increasing, increasing per capita consumption of steel, raw materials also readily available from various sources. So that is why these countries are now becoming the leading producers of steel. Okay, this is what was required in the answer. The spatial pattern of iron and steel industry, how it has changed across the world, and not how it has changed within a particular country. All right, so this was the answer which required a larger view. Okay, the answer is simple, it was just how you have understood the question. Okay, now coming to the next question. Critically evaluate the various resources of the oceans which can be harnessed to meet the resource crisis in the world. Various resources of the oceans which can be harnessed to meet the resource crisis in the world. So yeah, uh, very simple question. The main body of your answer should definitely be what are the various ocean resources. You have to define ocean resources, you have to list the ocean resources. This is the main body of your answer, because the question also mentions about resource crisis as a keyword in the question, so you have to use that keyword and give a background to your answer as to how the resource crisis in the world is looming large currently. What are the factors due to which we can say that a resource crisis is impending. Then I have added this, although not very important. This is I have added this only because the question also asks critically evaluate. So again, as I mentioned earlier, also critically evaluate does not always mean pros and cons. It is not always synonymous with pros and cons. It sometimes means in-depth analysis. All right. So you have to remember that. So because it's asking in-depth analysis, so we have to also mention about the issues which can occur because of the extraction of oceanic resources. Why am there is another reason I'm mentioning this. Even if the question had not asked about critically evaluate, there is another reason I'm mentioning this, because the environmental consciousness is increasing day by day, and not only amongst the people but even amongst UPSC. So the UPSC has started asking a number of questions on preservation of environment. So this is an angle which you can always include in your geography questions, and always think on these lines, that does this question has any environmental angle? Will this process or will this phenomena affect the environment in any way? You can always write a point or two about the same in your answer. Now, a particular note of this question is, whenever you see a question on oceanic resources, oceanic navigation, or for that matter anything, you have to mention UNCLOS and International Seabed Authority. Okay, we will be seeing a similar question in 2015 on oceanic salinity. Then we will be seeing a question on sea lines of communication in 2016. There also we mention about UNCLOS. Always make a point of mentioning United Nations Convention on Law of Sea whenever you encounter a question on oceanic resources. Now, the answer structure in the introduction, as I told you earlier, we will be mentioning the resource crisis and why it is occurring. Resource crisis as rising population, demand, declining continental resources, expanding human choices, etc. Then, what are the resources in ocean? The biotic and abiotic resources found in the oceanic water and bottoms are called marine resources. Biotic resources, abiotic resources, energy resources. These are three things. I have also drawn a pie chart over here just to give you a better presentation. What are the resources? This you can refer from any standard book: planktons, nectons, benthos. Abiotic, minerals of continental shelf, minerals of deep ocean bottom. This is where polymetallic nodules and precious metals will come into picture. All right. Then you have energy resources: petroleum and natural gas, tidal energy, wave energy, oceanic thermal energy conversion. You can also talk about deuterium, which you can get from oceans. Okay. Now, the last part of the question where I was talking about the environmental consciousness, which you can include, is the issues which are coming due to the extraction of oceanic resources. They can damage seafloor, oil spills can also happen, they can also affect the marine life. So, extraction should be strictly under guidance of International Seabed Authority to better regulate the process and within the ambit of United Nations Convention on Law of Sea. So in this question, we have beautifully incorporated almost all the parts of the question, and we have also incorporated all certain international bodies. See the question, through the question, it was very difficult to form a flow, but the way we have broken down the question, it now looks logical that there is the resource crisis in the world. That is why we are going for oceanic resources, but at the same time, while extracting resources, we should be careful. That is where we talk about the issues. All right. I hope it is clear to you guys. Now we'll see the last question. This, according to me, was a slightly tricky question. Not a tricky question, a slightly difficult question because generally people fall short of content in this question. But this question was a signal to you people because 14, 15, and 16 were those years when the government's relations with Africa were in news a lot. So in 14 also they are asked a question, 15 also they are asked a question on Indo-Africa relations. Okay, which tells you that you have to prepare certain points on Africa and use those points whenever you encounter a question on Africa. So, how does India see its place in the economic space of a rising natural resource rich Africa? How does India see its place in the economic space? Economic space is one keyword. Rising natural resource rich Africa. Okay. Now, introduction, you can talk about how Africa is rich in economic resources. You can talk about the various resources which you can get from Africa. Then, just in order to break your answer, what is India already doing in Africa? What more can be done in Africa to improve our relationship and to have a better place in the economic space of Africa? So, yeah, through the answer structure, in the beginning, we'll simply write about the natural resources of Africa. It is no longer considered a dark continent because it is resource rich. Oil and gas has been found in large quantities. Precious metals, particularly gold, platinum, and diamond, is also found. Okay. Then what is India already doing? India is primarily operating through private enterprises in Africa. Various private enterprises like Reliance, Airtel have already started functioning in Africa. Sectors such as education, health, tertiary services, telecommunication, IT. In these sectors, Government of India is also playing a role. Apart from that, it is also playing a role in skill development, engaging with educational institutions through exchange programs. This is very common. All right, etc. However, our policy with Africa is not so aggressive as that of China because it is following a yuan diplomacy. India is not doing that. In fact, India has a deeper relationship with Africa owing to our deep cultural history, deep shared cultural history. Now, what more can India do? Now, this is something which you have to create an answer, because this is part of, although it is part of international relations, but you have to create an answer because it is asked in GS1, so you can't do much about it. So, what can India do over here? We can do a 2+2 dialogue. We can improve our diplomatic ties. We can also improve defense ties. This will all lead to improvement of economic ties for India. 2+2 dialogue, India is already following with USA. It's planning to follow with USA. We are already following this with Japan. Okay. Now, I want to mention one more thing over here. There are certain regional economic groupings of Africa, which you guys can remember. These can come in handy even in other papers, which are COMESA, EAC, ECOWAS, and CICAS. So what do these stand for? This is East African Community. This is Economic Community of West African States. This is the common common economic community of Central African States. Similarly, there is COMESA. Now, Community for East I think East African states. So this is I don't remember the full form for COMESA. But yeah, these are four regional economic groupings in Africa with which India should directly improve our economic ties. Then there is the Indo-Africa Forum, which meets annually. We can strengthen that. All right. So this is something I want to tell you certain things, that this is an answer which you will not be finding in any textbook. This you will have to formulate on your own. To make your answer better than others, you just have to break your answer into two or three parts. That what is India already doing and what more can be done, because the question is not very clear what is exactly trying to ask. It's an essay type question almost, but in order to again accommodate number of points, you have to break your answer. That will make your answer look much more better compared to others. All right. So we'll be concluding the video here. If you have any doubts or any queries, you can post them in the comment section. If you have any suggestions or if you want me to discuss any particular topic, do post that in the comment section. Next, we will be discussing the paper of 2015. Till then, goodbye.